So anyway, why don't we get into the woods and see what we've got? I learned trees first in Vermont back in '73. I was teaching sixth graders in the middle of the winter, 2 feet of snow. They'd come up from Boston in plastic boots and things and be freezing while I was trying to identify trees for them with twigs. And then that's when I first learned trees, and then when the leaves came out, I couldn't identify any of the trees anymore because all I knew was like the little bud scars and things. So anyway, we'll see what we find.
Jake's just here for the dog.
What is the stuff? The vines climbing all over the trees?
Yeah. Well, we could look at that.
I grew up in Princeton. I don't remember this when I was growing up, and it's like a jungle.
I know.
And we live right here, and it's over every single. We moved here 3 years ago. Look at it. It's like every single tree has these vines like from the jungle.
It's not kudzu.
Yeah. Well, actually, yes. I mean, you know kudzu from the south, but what we have up here is, well, there's wisteria, but that's not too common. And then the other thing would be, well, I'll think of it. But anyway, here we've got, this is Japanese honeysuckle.
Okay.
This one with the kind of gray tan bark. And then this one with the rough bark that peels off.
Yeah.
That's a native, that's wild grape.
Wild grape.
So you've got two
Wild
of
grape.
right there.
They oftentimes don't bear grapes. It's rather disappointing, but some of the grapes are really nice, you know, some big ones. But anyway, so this is an exotic. This is Japanese honeysuckle. And do you know multiflora rose?
Yeah.
It's a bush, right? It gets near a tree, it starts growing up like a vine.
Look at that.
So if you follow this,
Yeah.
it'll go way up there,
Yeah.
and you'll have white flowers, you know, bursting out in a month or two.
It's amazing. They take the trees, and they also think the trees are dead, and all these vines are all over them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, the vines add weight. If you have a ice storm, all the vines add weight because the ice has more surface area to cling to, and then plus they're weakening the tree, so a lot of trees fall because of that double whammy of weight and weakness. And so.
You say you don't have kudzu up there?
No.
I'm from the south. It's awful. Come on. I know it.
Bella, come on, Bella.
Hi, Kathleen.
Bella.
You don't have to pull them down. They just kids love to try to pull them down.
So does some grown-ups.
We had so many in our backyard previously, and it just
All this is multiflora rose. This
Yeah, taking over. Any suggestions on getting rid of that?
well, it's actually a disease that's starting to kill it.
Oh.
Very convenient.
Yes, because it is aggressive.
It is. And the other thing about multiflora rose is it has fish hook
Yes, it does.
barbs, yes. And so if you try, if you get caught, the last thing you want to do is like muscle your way away from it. You want to just kind of move towards it and pick it off or cut it off if you have clippers in your hands. And then walk away or turn, rotate. But you never want to pull back because then it's like a fish, the barb just digs in.
Yeah, I had to fight with a lot of those guys putting in all this. 50. 50.
You walk back here?
I have ridden my bike. I tried to find a way to canal.
Sometimes.
And not wanting to ride down 27.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's nothing there.
Good afternoon.
Hi. I never knew this thing existed.
Oh, really?
Never knew. I heard the name before. It was like, whoa, gotta find it.
Oh, we got a crowd.
Pick the right thing?
Yeah. So I'll stop strategically so some people can just like stand in the mud while I talk. You see all these trees around here that look like this? They have lower branches like this. You know, if you look around, just about every tree has those lower branches that bend down. Does anybody know what that is?
Deer.
What?
Deer.
Deer. You see deer everywhere.
Tree melancholy.
Yeah, tree melancholy. Well, that's a good one. It does. I mean, it does look pretty sad. Those are pin oaks. Pin oak has very distinctive growth like that, and you see pin oaks on the streets, and a lot of them are dying from bacterial leaf scorch. If you've seen a lot of pin oaks going out, just getting dieback, and that's right. That's melancholy too, I guess. Maybe these are weeping for all their brethren that are losing their lives to this disease that was introduced. But
why is when you see the pin oak in the town, how come they don't have all the spreading branches coming out?
it may
Like
be.
we had pin oaks.
You're
and
right.
I never had
Yeah.
that I remember.
Well, either somebody's pruning them, somebody's actually doing some work, or they have stronger. I don't know. They're getting a lot of sun from the side, so that might change the behavior. Either they keep the leaves on so they look like really healthy stems, or they could be self-pruning, but these are obviously not pruning themselves. And then this one here is a red oak in full bloom. You can see the glorious, minuscule, minute red blossoms up there on the twigs if you look very closely and crane your neck. Maybe we'll see something more down to earth where we can see the red maples in bloom.
Steve, can you tell a sugar maple without the leaves on it? The dog.
Which way should we go? This way?
This way is great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pond up
This is loop?
Yeah, it kind of loops around.
Ah, there we go. That's a good one.
There's barbed wire here, so just be careful. It's on the ground right here.
Oh, what's here? Oh, barbed wire.
Yeah, some of it's rusty
I'm
too.
oblivious.
So.
Black potato chip bark. Looks like black potato chips. I don't think anyone ever ate them. This is a black cherry. Wild cherry, native black cherry. Once you get to know the bark, you can recognize trees from a long distance. So you can just be walking along and recognize everything as you go along. And you'll see a couple more down there. You see that bark? It's a special kind of bark. That's a black cherry. You don't have to see anything more than that. And then all the grass, you see all the brown grass around here? Maybe on the other side more. That's wood reed. It's in a London area. It's a native grass that's very common in the understory in really wet places like this. Wood reed. Oh wow. I see. This is wild cedar. Everybody know wild cedar? I mean, what? Red cedar. Wild. It was wild.
They had the barbed wire. They had a fence.
This red cedar, it would have come in early, when this was a field. The red cedars would have grown. Now it's pretty much shaded out. So this thing isn't getting any sun anymore, but it's hanging on, barely. And red cedar, you may know, is very resistant to rot, so it's going to be here a long time. I think there's a few leaves up there still, so it's hanging in there.
I wonder if this was all open grassland at one point. Was this all
I think it was
field?
part of the Gulick farm.
Yeah, so it was part of Gulick Farm.
Is there any way you can tell how long ago this was?
farmhouse right over there.
Because I was trying to imagine this. Was it just open field? Are there no Or when did it stop being open field?
Well, our house got put in to the first.
Beautiful red oak and red maple. If you look up, you may be able to see the red flowers at the very top. Those are the red flowers. They're wind pollinated, so they aren't really showy. They don't need to be showy. They don't need to attract any insects. It's all wind pollination. What?
Red maple.
Red maple, yes. Which conveniently has red flowers, which you can barely see. But maybe there will be a shorter one and we can see them that way.
Do you know when we have like the history of how this park was donated?
Hey, look, a swimming pool.
This is rich with bullfrogs, and we can hear it from our window in summertime.
People have just started.
Yeah, they have.
John pointed them out the other night. Watch out, Blake.
This pond in summertime is full of bullfrogs and fun stuff like a dragonfly larva and pollywogs and tadpoles.
Salamanders?
I've never found any, but I'm sure there are. We come down with our nets and the boys get dirty and catch, and it's very noisy. It's beautiful at night. They're croaking away. Here, come on.
Two ponds are on the property. The other has filled in naturally. And this is as high as you will see this pond. Other times of the year, this will dry out totally. So it needs the rains, it needs the snow that we got to bring itself back. It's not very deep. You can kind of see the muck at the bottom, but
Hey, you can actually see all the way to the bottom.
yeah, it's clear. I mean, it's nice, clean, and not going to sun.
How clean is that, Ed?
What are you really doing?
Mom, let Fizz in!
Fizz wants to go.
Let him! Let him, Mom, let him!
Go in. He's got 16 feet to go. Are you crazy? He needs a bath anyway, so he may as well.
A lot of pinos. Right. Here. All right. Well.
That to the backside technically goes to Autumn Park.
So there is a technical.
Wow.
Easy bit.
Oh yeah. If we were doing habitat restoration here, there's a viburnum. I'm not sure what kind of viburnum it is, but there's a viburnum in here and a multiflora rose crawling all over it.
Is it going to kill it? The
So, well, I
multiflora
mean-
rose?
What you're trying to do is, I mean, there is some sunlight here, so you're trying to get the native plants to have access to the sun, you know, to the solar energy coming in. And so you cut off the multiflora rose. That would allow the native plant to grab that energy and get stronger and reproduce and, you know, hopefully spread.
Multiflora rose is not native.
No, it's not native. That's what this is right here. You can see it's a big old specimen. So you just cut it at the bottom. You don't have to pull it off or anything.
Well, we should have brought clippers along.
Yeah. You'd just be a full saw, you know. This one that might be a sugar maple, but hard to say. You see, it's not really red flowers up there. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. Everybody know sassafras?
Yeah.
Ever heard of sassafras? You got sassafras here. Yeah, the root beer.
Root beer.
You used to use the roots to make root beer. You can see the it's like a bunch of, I mean, this is not a very good specimen. But you can see it's like teeth, you know, just kind of one on top of another. There are these lines here, and kind of deep furrows. And so yeah, there's a bigger one back there. They tend to clone. So if you see a little one, there's probably a bigger one nearby that it came from.
It only has a few branches with leaves.
I know, it's a terrible specimen. They get big around here. Yeah, but that has a vine growing up it. I'm thinking that is sassafras.
I call it rivers.
Oh yeah? Yeah? Yeah, that's good. I wanted to mention blackberry.
Blackberry?
It looks like you can get a lot of blackberries here at a certain time of year.
Yeah. Nick can speak
Is that
to
right?
good.
Yes.
Is anybody? Yes?
Yeah. Over there's raspberries too, and we got buckets full.
Okay.
Buckets
they're
and
wild,
buckets
so
will
they're
come
like-
wild raspberries
Yeah.
and blackberries.
Yeah. You may have the wild raspberries may be wineberries.
We've eaten them. Do
Do they have a purple fuzz on the stem? That's
Like very prickly purple ones, or no?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be wineberry. And then there's the black raspberry that has very kind of white, almost a white smooth
Okay.
skin. But if you're interested in identifying blackberry, you look for these deep ridges on the stems. Like here, you can see a deep ridge. That's evidence of a blackberry. Also, if there's a thorn that's penetrating your skin, that could be blackberry too. So, but they're pretty tasty.
So I only
Otherwise, I might push his foot into the wall.
Yeah, I can do it.
I don't like bridges.
This is only a test.
Forget everything.
Really? You know what it is? Yeah, it's true. It is evergreen, and it's native, and it's called American holly. You ever have holly? It's in the holiday season. Holly Day, I don't know.
This is more like a
This is
tree.
American holly. It's a native. It's staying very low in here, and just
It looks like a tree.
just waiting for something above it to fall down so it has some sunlight. But you probably have this in your yard, or you might. A lot of people have American holly. There are exotic kinds that have much like more vicious thorns and thicker leaves that, you know, there's holly shrubs like that. But this is the native one. So there's actually quite a few of them in here. I saw some earlier.
Do you know what kind of stick this is?
Oh, let me see.
Red.
Red. Well, boy, I don't know. It might be a cherry. See, there's a bunch of dots on there. Anybody remember what this is? Black potato chip bark. Black makes pot is what? Black cherry, yes. This is black cherry, and then this crawling up it. I don't know how they do this. You know, you'd think it would be going round and round, but the wild grapevine, very stringy bark. So they're both native, and they seem to be coexisting.
And has taken down a number of the big trees. You'll see some cut because you can't yank them. You can cut them and after 3 years, 4 years, will dry out enough to, naturally come down or a good storm. So we went through in the early stages and cut a lot that were at least within the path areas to try to save as many of the trees as possible, off on both sides of the path. So whatever you see times 20, or times 30 were here originally, that we thinned out over the 10 years or so.
Yeah. And that's in Smoyer Park?
Smoyer has that as well. It's never been cut there.
Oh, you did it here then?
We did it here.
Okay.
Where this was all these were heavy pulls. So they did have pulled down some big ones along the way, but
I should say Ed is the president of the Gulick, co-president of the Gulick Preserve.
so we helped develop and make all the paths. These were originally the truck paths on the farm, about half of them, and then half we made. So everything goes in a circle, loops. But he said use the natural paths that they used of these 30 acres. That's represented out of the original 42 acres that the Gulicks had.
Ed, do you know the story of how they sold the land to the township?
Yeah, they were persuaded. They were talk of selling it to developers, and this is, as you've been walking, you've probably seen a lot of wetland on both sides of you. There's a lot of wet areas, so the township explained that much of the area they would not okay for houses because of the wetland. There's also a historic element to this property. It is regarded as the longest single family living on a property in Princeton. Somebody named Gulick has lived here. I don't want to misquote. It's I think it's 1780 something. It's just a few years after we became a country. Somebody named Gulick. It was the stagecoach stop, the barn house between New York and Philadelphia. The stagecoach would stop there, and general store supplies would be refurbished and so forth.
That was built in like 1600s. That
yeah, it was before the Gulicks, I think. There's also a famous, if any of you are history buffs, there's a famous document that was signed in the barn that's kind of fallen down now, but signed in the barn, and it was at a time when I guess the Virginias had split up and the Carolinas had split up, and there was talk of if Jersey ever splits. So they signed a document in there that provisionally said if the state splits and is separated out and so forth, where it would be. And that document was signed. There's a name for it, pardon me, but I don't recall. That line, you all know, because you've all driven on it, it's called Province Line Road. That's why it's called such a thing. It is a line that would have separated the state into multiple states.
And that was signed in the homestead.
That was signed in the Gulick, what is the barn now, is there. So going back to township, after the Smoyer Park, influences from the communities around Smoyer Park to make that a combination of active and preserved land. They then rethought of how Gulick should be used. So the township did provide at the time incentives to the tax incentives and so forth to donate the land. And then there was certain things were supposed to be done to the barn that ultimately wasn't, to try to preserve the barn, but that didn't quite happen. But that's when the 30 of the 42 acres or 43 acres was deeded over. And
what year was that?
There was some tax incentives. I don't know there was straight money, as I recall from the meetings ultimately, but it was very much made clear that they would not allow homes to be built on this property. And so therefore that was a nice encouragement to be cooperative.
What year was that?
About, I guess it was about 10, 12 years ago now. Yeah, so 10 years ago, I think it was 11 years ago it became official. They did have, as Nick pointed out, the barbed wire when she said to be careful of the barbed wire when we were walking. So that area, as we were walking down the path, that entire area to our left was a large barbed wire and electrified fence area. The Gulicks had bulls, big bulls. Until about, well, they had one left until about 10 years ago. It was the size, its face was like, it looked like it ate 3 cows. It was just so big. that was for the bulls. Ever so often, the story goes, they would get away, the bulls, I guess, electrified fence, and go through people's yards and leave a print or two through somebody's vegetable garden or landscape or front yard. So they put on this electrified fence, and obviously that we've taken care of, or they took care of the electrified part, and we took as much care of the barbed wire as we could. And that's what you will see a few other things if you ever come back and then go through some outskirt areas through there. There is some poles, and we tried to cut the wire wherever we saw, so nature could just do its part and kind of, you know, protect everybody else. So that kind of gives you just a quick overview.
Didn't the Gulicks sell land to Andrew Carnegie when he was building the dam?
I know the Gulicks, is that right, Bob? The Gulicks owned, at one time, the brother, because the family extended, the brother, between all the way up to the power plant, the water treatment plant, from there, Montgomery essentially bought her through about this whole side of Princeton. The Gulicks owned, like, we're talking tremendous proportion of Princeton between the extended family. The brother ultimately, he had where Debbie, what's her name? The house on the corner on
Right here in Harrington.
yeah, on Harringtown. Wojahowicz. The Wojahowicz house, the original part, there's 3 parts to their home, was the brother. And he owned everything going up to what's then the power plant. And when he first sold to a general who was brought in, who actually helped develop the power plant for the community, and that's why that was sold for $1 back to the township, just $1. It was through his generosity following the Google. So yeah, they were players. I mean, they were definitely power players through the state, is my understanding.
Is there anything else that needs to happen with the house, the buildings that are still up? That
Well, there was a couple. So they lived out that way. Right off of.
They're right out on 27.
On 27, they have a home, the barn, and then a couple side pieces. There is opportunity at some point if the son wants to build behind sort of where you folks, you know, where the Garbers are, and like the backyard of Dodds. They do have about an acre of land, or 0.8 to do that. That house was a private home. A couple has been here forever.
Yeah.
So as you do the path, you see it stops right before the property and goes around. We changed the flow of the path years ago to respect their privacy.
Yeah.
There were 3 other homes that were built back in World War II for returning vets. Those were later given to township employees, and those were ultimately condemned due to disrepair, and they were very, very, very small, almost like tenement shacks, call it. And those were taken down. You'll be going into the tree farm that you could speak to from an arborist standpoint. That tree farm, reason it exists is the Gulicks subleased a lot of stuff if they could. So there was, they leased out that land for a person to make Christmas tree farm and all. It went bankrupt, didn't take off. And then they leased out another landscaper to pile stuff and machinery up off of 27. That's why you may see a second road on the left, right next to their home. That was for that guy to just stick equipment and all sorts of stuff. So they tried to, where they could, they also leased out permits for hunting here. Obviously that's no longer permitted, and this is township property we're strolling on. But yeah, they tried to, they do have credits as a working farm. So that was part of those credits that were given to them.
Right.
So they have agricultural credits, and their land is regarded from a tax standpoint not as a home, such as ourselves paying taxes, but as an agricultural property.
Yeah.
So they don't hunt anymore? I thought I saw like up in trees sometimes. The ladders and the lookouts.
Well, we stopped. We stopped that. So there were some people who didn't quite understand where the property lines were and the respect of our township was. So there were some blinds that were, you'll see some either old blinds that are still up there, not used, or you'll see, well, there used to be blinds taken down. Now what's the name of the hunting group that Princeton
White buffalo.
White buffalo, thank you. So they have done a lot of culling here. They have set up those various methods of baiting and shooting and trapping. So they've done that here. So it used to be daily, deer walking through, our backyard and paths, and now it's rare. And typically we'll see somebody with a tag on, which means they weren't from this side. They were from the Riverside side. They were tagged. If they were found here, they were not tagged.
Are the Wallace family still alive?
Yeah, the Gulicks are still there. The son, Richard, is still there. He owns the property. The last I knew, the mom was still living.
Where do they live?
Right off of 27. A couple houses down from the corner of River Road.
Is that the house that is down near the water on the first floor? You can hardly go in. You see a boat.
No, that's on the left. This is on the right.
Oh, that's
This is on the right. This is on the right side. So
Looks like a nice big old house.
They've always been very private. My understanding from way back when. They had shotguns and German shepherds and they like their privacy and it's now respected. There's a fence and it's clear lines of where they are. That was one of the things we quickly understood after we started strolling the property and they didn't know where their property line was and we weren't positive and we made sure if they wanted a fence, let's put it up and quickly.
I see the odd car going by. What street is that?
So we're on River Road there. And Herringtown there. So Herringtown is straight in front of us. River Road is straight to our right.
Does it go all the way to Herringtown Road?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so it backs up to the homes that live on Herringtown. Number of the backyards there, the property runs to. Pretty thick in that area. Would have been nice if we were all here about 2.5, 3 years ago. You would have been fascinated by the pine area. 60 to 80 pines, 40 to 60 feet in height. The entire floor bed was pine needles. It was very enchanting.
Yes.
The horizontal wind hurricane thing we had 3 years ago took down every single one that existed there. They were all within this feet of each other. So one dominoed the next, and it is taller than we are in piles of if somebody wants to be a little adventuresome, a little tough for kids, but adult wants to be a little macho or woman, adventurous, to climb. I mean, it's climbing over trees that are piled one on top of another like you'd see out of the movie Twister or something like that. It is that unbelievable back there. And there was a path we made. 4 months later, the hurricane hit. We made a path there. It was quite enchanting. It connected to this area right here. And didn't last long.
The white pines really aren't natural to this area. They're further north species. And when we had the really bad drought, I think it was a couple years ago, that was really tough on them, and a lot died the following year after that drought. So you can have this delayed effect of stress. And it's because they just aren't really well adapted for this far south. There are different species that are down in North Carolina or in the pinelands, but those are not white pines.
And the only other last thing, you may want to keep your eyes out. You'll spot it better than any of us. The other reason the deer was so plentiful in this area, other than the obvious water and streams and brush to eat on and berries that we talked about, was apple trees. There was a couple apple orchards here. Two specifically that were on the property. One we won't quite see it, but I'll give a yelp when you're passing sort of the back trail. There was, and still to this day, a grouping of a dozen or so apple trees that obviously great food for the deer to be munching on. And when you have to get through some pretty tough thicket to get to it, so we never made a trail intentionally. But there's always deer droppings galore and even antlers. I don't know if anybody knows why you don't see antlers. You guys know? Like why you see so many deer around somewhere and then you don't see the antlers after
they get caught on the trees?
Well, but then what happens to the antlers? Like why don't you see them X amount of later on?
Some animals chewing them for calcium.
There you go. He wins a prize. Give him an extra something. Ants and other rodents eat. So if your deer dies, you got to spot it if it had big antlers within a couple days, because the rodents will gobble it up as a food source and eat it. Yeah. Yeah. So we did. My son and I one time, unfortunately, a deer had jumped over something and obviously broke its leg and died. And we saw the whole carcass. It was within a day, I guess, of dying. And the antlers were on him, and my son was young at the time, Daniel, and he was like, oh good, he goes to grab him, and head's moving. I'm like, okay, let's just not touch this, and let's just give this a week or two. I didn't know about the rodent thing at the time, and because, didn't want the head. And yeah, hey mom, look what we found. So we came back about 3 weeks later. Gone. All gone, and the carcass was, the birds and everything on the carcass. It was pretty, I couldn't believe it. I was wow. So I then asked, and that's what happened. Nature, nature takes care of itself.
Self-cleansing.
Well, yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. How are we doing on time? Or should we, doing okay?
There's a little thing to cross here, but I mean, I don't know how to. Ed, do you know how to get through from the Christmas tree farm?
Yeah, right where they're walking, right? The kids walk.
I mean, once you're there, can you circle back in, or?
Yeah, we can keep going. Yeah, this continues. It's a continual loop.
So we'll just take the loop and...
Oh yeah, please, because it's really interesting for you. Oh, you'll see some crazy good stuff. Yeah. On the other side is really neat. I haven't been back to make sure it's clear of stuff growing, because it does get a little. Well, we'll just hopefully make sure. We have a couple of.
We have some people power, right?
Oh, let's put stepping stones down along the way to just kind of.
Oh my God! Let Bisbee go in there!
There's stepping stones. There's like. I mean,
Let
it still takes a
Bisbee
little
go in there!
Yeah, I see that's a lovely mud pie.
Try to stay right in the middle area where you see the stones.
He always goes. Come on, Bisbee.
You need a hand?
I think I'm okay.
Come on, Larry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, hey, take your hands away. Don't make that muddy. Don't make
here.
that muddy.
Thank you.
Okay, big step. Okay, Bob, you okay? I'm good, thank you. Just, we put down big slab stones to see if it's...
if you see an evergreen, typically it's been planted by somebody.
Well,
So it'll grow. I mean, they'll grow up. They'll become large spruce trees.
Good.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it'd be good for maybe owls. They like those evergreen forests, protection at night, because these pine forests that they had great ambitions of replanting back when everything was a field. They wanted to reforest everything, and so they planted all these pine and spruce, which aren't really natural to this area, and in rows, and it would all grow up and be so dense, so it creates that enchanted look. The same thing over at Community Park North, near the township building and everything, and which was really nice to walk through, because the multiflora rose couldn't grow in there, and you could actually get off the trail and explore, but it wasn't a natural kind of thing, and there really wasn't much else growing there, so in a way it was an ecological desert. It might have been good for some owls, but I mean, I've tried to find out what would this be good for wildlife wise, and that's basically it, because there wasn't any food on the floor, so, but it was a special place, and now they're gone, so
If you see around Princeton, any park that's been built and any landscaping they're doing, that's now the borough, well, was the borough township, now it's just Princeton. It came from here. So it was, if you see any trees that look semi like this, it was these trees.
So in the parks, like Potts Park?
Yeah,
and,
all the different
that's
parks
where they came
pulled
from
here.
Good. Okay.
For all throughout Princeton, any park, any landscaping that was needed.
Now they're getting big, huh?
Now they then sold it off. So hopefully some of our taxes have dropped along the way, or at least been held, because they sold this to individual bids.
This property?
These actual trees.
Oh, just the trees,
So they
not
built
the
up.
property.
No. I'm sorry. To clarify, just I'm talking about the trees. These specific. What are these? Spruces. These spruces specifically. So this was.
Take them out.
Yeah, this was. Oh my gosh. One was here. So when you refer to rows and so forth, I mean, there was 20 of them, 15 of them from here to there. I mean, every row here was packed. So this is thinned out. I don't know if they're going to pull more. It could be,
What would people buy the trees for?
landscapers. They were bidded out to landscapers. Yeah.
Big though, aren't they now?
Well, some of them in the parks have gotten really big.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
They're
And,
gorgeous
and they were
shape.
pretty
I
big
mean,
to start, and
they're
that came
perfect.
from here. That's why they were mature already.
Very cool.
So that part was real good. The landscapers, somebody's perspective, if it was good or bad.
Yeah.
But it's supposed, raise revenue for our town. So I wish there was some more left. They took much more than
It must have been really cool.
They
the way
took
it
many
looked.
more than I personally would
Okay.
have liked. But,
Well,
but it is what it is.
Yeah, I can talk just briefly about the grasses here. This is purple top, which is a native prairie grass. We have prairie grasses here that are the same grasses that the buffalo eat out in the plains, the tall grass plains, tall grass prairies. So this is purple top, and you'll see it like right there. There's, if you look around, you'll start seeing purple top everywhere in a field like this. This, I believe, is broom sedge, which is actually one of the blue stem grasses. You'll see that these tiny seeds here that gets blown by the wind, which of course in the prairie is the way to go. You want to use the wind. And so this is one of the blue stems. There's big blue stem, which gets quite tall. It has like a turkey foot of 3 bunches of seeds at the top, and then there's little blue stem, and then there's this broom sedge, which was typically farmers did not like to see this because it was indicative of a poor soil. But it's a beautiful bronze color, and you can see if the field was completely covered with it, it would be. Even now it's rather gorgeous this time of year. So, and all these are native. And then this is wild garlic. If you see something green and kind of hollow like this on the ground, that's not native, but it's a ubiquitous kind of.
Can you eat it?
I'm sure you could. You could try it. I don't know. I've never actually used it in cooking. It's strong. But you can find it anywhere here. And then the other things that are cool season grasses, which are not native. The green stuff, if the field greens up early, that's not a native grass. You see all these blue stems, all these native ones are still brown. They have no green. They'll be starting up much later in the spring it's much later in the spring before they start their new growth.
That would be good to cook with, actually.
I know,
Yeah.
I think so too.
Delicious.
How old are those?
Come to our yard.
You need it weeded, right?
Oh, the sycamores?
Yeah,
or-
sycamores. How old would those be?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Maybe 40, 50 years old. I don't think much more.
Yeah, it's definitely garlic flavored.
The other thing about these blue stem grasses, you see all that, they actually are adapted for fire. So you've heard of prairie fires. The plants are actually adapted to produce that because their roots survive. And then the fire cleans out all the vegetation from the last year above ground. And then that leaves a lot of fertilizer in the ash. And that generates, they aren't shaded by the old growth if a fire comes through. And then the new growth can come up. And it's also really good for birds, like prairie species like quail and things, because the baby quail need to have all these places to navigate through. And if there hasn't been a fire, then there's a lot of thick grass and the dew gets on the grass and then they get wet and they're more susceptible to disease. So actually fire I'm not saying right here, but actually fire is a very important ecological tool for healthy landscapes.
Looking ahead, the trees have a white cast.
Yeah, that's sycamore. Sycamore is, and you'll see that in lowlands. You'd be driving down the highway and you'll see a low area and you'll start seeing a lot of trees like that. Sort of look like they have camouflage, kind of white and green. And that's sycamore.
Is it all year round white, or does it change during the season?
No, I don't think the bark changes. It's just you can see it now.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have to double it that way. We got a little blocked off here. This is
That
normally,
was the path.
but we
that
got
it-
blocked off there.
Oh, wow.
So we're gonna have to double.
Okay.
You can get to the area. We'll just double back and go around that
Private
field.
pond.
This is a private property.
I see.
This is a private
On
home
River Road.
on River. So we
Do
should
they have a bull?
go there again. Yeah, no bull.
Do
but
we have a
private.
bull?
We should go there again, and then when you hit that middle meadow, you know, that you were standing on,
Yeah.
don't go
Oh.
back the way we're going. We're gonna go that way, and you'll
Okay.
get out. We just still gonna miss this little diagonal cut through.
I think they're sending a message here.
Well, yeah, there's about 5 trees. I see that, but a couple of bow saws later or chainsaws later.
I see.
We'll,
They're blocking
we'll
public
clear
land.
that. We'll clear
When you
that.
get into civilization.
We'll clear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's several trees that
Yeah.
toppled this way.
Right. People tend to take adopt ownership of.
Yeah, but that's still our
Public land,
path, so
that's-
so
that's
we'll come back and, you know. But yeah, it takes an immediate diagonal then to respect your property, because the trail was there way back when, but
How pines are.
I think they had
Oh,
a bull more
that's
recently.
a
I think they had a
might be
bull
a-
more recently, because I've heard the bull.
spruce tree.
Yeah, within the past 10 years.
I don't know, 50 years. It's really hard to tell because, it depends on how much sun they get.
you know what you may be probably hearing, Bob, at night?
Wild garlic or wild onion or
Yeah, it's wild garlic.
wild garlic. Is it edible?
I've been chewing. It's got a fantastic flavor, and you could cook with it. You'd have free organic garlic. If you
It's almost like chives too or something.
Yeah,
It's really, it's like
it's like a chive, but it has the taste of garlic.
Yeah.
Try chewing a little bit. It's absolutely delicious.
I have like my kids pick it and they're like, here, mommy, and I'm.
That's fantastic, though.
I mean,
That's the
like,
kind of thing you can do an internet search and
right.
get all kinds of.
Well, Steve and I were at a lecture yesterday from the first minister of Scotland.
I don't know
Oh.
And you know the language that, Gaelic. You assume that it's Gaelic. No, he pronounces it garlic.
Garlic.
Again and again, he said garlic.
Wow.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
would be very
Strong
Scottish
accent.
to use.
Well,
but
he's the Prime Minister of Scotland.
yeah, yeah. And is this today?
Is yesterday.
But I mean, this is in contemporary times.
He is the first he's the Prime Minister of Scotland right now.
And he's saying garlic.
He says garlic. The language. Also,
What does he say?
he says,
Gaelic.
Gaelic. We read it as Gaelic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He, a Scotsman, says garlic.
Which is
Yeah, and he also says Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie, not Nagy.
we do not
Carnegie.
speak the same language. I spent a year in Scotland in college.
Did you pick up on something?
I did. Oh yeah, and I came back. Like people were like, "How are you talking?" Because I was saying, a bit of this, a bit of that. But there's all kinds of pronunciation.
He's a really nice guy, and I have a picture taken with him. And he's well, he was given a public lecture at the university. They put him on the front page of the
Oh, that's how you saw. Oh,
It wasn't that. There was a lot of people there, but it was not packed.
no, but it should have been. Like if I had known, I would have been
Right,
there.
and they publicized
it's so
it.
Princeton. Yeah, but they don't publicize that well.
I couldn't film there because I didn't have permission.
Where was it? How?
It was at where the engineering quadrangle is,
Yeah.
William Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a building there. Very, once you get in it, it's big. The room had an odd reverberation where he's Scottish, so it's a little hard to understand. But then, there was this kind of a slap
Could
effect
use
with
a
the voice.
translator.
Well, some of it was on the television because of the amplification. You kind of had this back and forth thing.
Yeah. Was he a good speaker?
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, the better part of it was the Q&A. The Q&A in these things is always better anyway.
It's so true. It's practical.
And he's not going to be able to outline the history of the world.
Right.
Yeah, he's sort of making a case for empathy, but it's not a huge scholarly thesis that he's doing.
Yeah.
But it's more just the atmosphere. I mean, this guy, it might be just 5 million people there, but this is a real nation, and he's you just walk in there. Nobody pats you down.
Yeah.
And then you come up to him right afterwards, and you say, "Can I get a picture?" And camera didn't work. But he was more than happy to.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like this is the Barack Obama. He's equivalent. You know, he's the man in Scotland. And, you know, and this isn't, you know, the Cayman Islands or something like that. This is like a nation with a lot of history that has influenced America.
They get lumped in so much with the English that they really have to. Like when I was taking classes there, I had to take a Scottish history class. And the guy who taught it was like the premier expert on Scottish history, so I was so like honored to even be taking it.
Right.
But he was making sure that people remembered they were in Scotland and what Scotland was, you know, as opposed to they just.
Well, see, he's the first guy, you know, first minister who is for Scottish independence, and he's trying to make that happen.
Wow.
And he was part of his thing was he was, you know, talking about that and how, you know, and he was directly analogizing it to, you know, some of the attitudes with the American Revolution.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you say, well, the people in Britain, they say, oh, you can't do that, you won't survive, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's the same with you in America in 1776.
Right. What do you think they told them?
Yeah, oh, you can't make it on your own.
Right. And my God, they've been making it on their own all this, you know? It's not even. And it is a very separate.
He's a very green guy too. I mean, it's a very progressive country when it comes to that.
That's good.
And very conscious.
I've been keeping up with my, you know, adopted country for a year. I didn't know that. I didn't know they were so green. I didn't know, you know, it's been a while since I was.
Yeah, well, he definitely is, and obviously he's got some people who go along with it. You know, they'll listen to him. I mean, he's very conscious of it, and they have oil up there, and you know, he wants, you know, the whole, you know, zero carbon. I mean, he wants to bring that down.
Yeah. Good. It sounds like a great lecture.
Yeah, I you know.
I would have come if I known.
Well, that's why I like to film these things, and I could have put it up, but you know, I got shut down. And for what good reason? None.
No good reason. Do you put it on YouTube or?
Well, I'm putting these things up on Vimeo.
Oh, on Vimeo. Okay.
And you know, anything that's interesting.
How do I look for?
Straight shoot interviews.
Straight shoot. When I used to live in Princeton.
Lemberville's nice too.
It's so nice.
You know, if I was
there for the nature, that's why I'm there.
If I was there, I would be bicycling up that towpath
every day.
lot.
I am on that towpath every day. The geese
you know,
know me, the ducks know me.
And here's the little thing: the Pennsylvania side of the towpath is even better.
Yeah.
It's even better.
You know, I discovered the Pennsylvania side a few weeks ago, and it's really.
It's got those houses right. How does that work? How do they not get flooded?
Isn't that amazing? Well,
the river must rise.
The answer to that is they do. I was living on the river last.
Okay, that's a good answer.
I was living on the river last summer in fall. I got evacuated before Sandy.
Okay.
That's why I moved. You know, so it's like they do, because it didn't actually end up flooding because we all know there was more wind than water.
Yeah.
But they have so many floods, and their stories about cleaning up from floods are horrific. I mean, it's like not, So you know, it's a risk you take, especially in these days of changing climate.
We're talking about dogwood. This one has a lot of vines growing up it. It has, here's the multiflora rose turning into a vine, and I think it's mostly multiflora rose. But anyway, you can see it's kind of a cobbled bark, if like a cobblestone street or something. That's a characteristic dogwood, and if you look up, it has a very characteristic kind of twigs up there. I don't see any flower buds. I guess this thing's pretty stressed. And then that's a monster wild grape. You see that vine there? That's as thick as this trunk. That's a wild grapevine. It's just.
That's a vine. Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Oh, and then you see that vine going up that tree back there? That's real hairy vine. That's poison ivy.
Yeah.
If it's hairy, it's scary.
Yeah.
So that's how you tell poison ivy vine, and then there's a lot of wild grape back there too. So you can just kind of see all these. Oh wow! And then there's Asian bittersweet, Oriental bittersweet, the one that's kind of rotating up there that has gray bark. You see how the tree is getting choked by it lower down, and you can see how the tree is trying to bulge around it. But that's Oriental bittersweet. That's an exotic vine that's a real problem. And you see its growth pattern is more like a strangling of the tree, whereas the wild grape doesn't seem to wrap itself around the tree so much, it just kind of goes up somehow.
The wild grape doesn't kill the tree, does it?
Well, I mean, it could start competing with the upper branches, and then when it starts competing up there, then the tree doesn't have enough energy to sustain itself, and it weakens. But it's not. It's at least not choking the tree, like the Oriental bittersweet is known to do. So we've got active vine community here.
Everybody, just check. I was just looking to see if one of the trails were open. It's too much blocked, but
Oh, that's the deer. The leg of the
I don't know,
deer.
one of the pretty big joint of something. Jeff, you're a doctor. What joint?
Bigger than a deer.
Hip bone? I'll believe whatever you say, Jeff.
This is a deer, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a deer. I think it's bigger, right?
It's a beef bone.
What would be bigger here? It's the male deer.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You can see all the,
Yeah,
inside part. It's kind of cool.
that's
If
cool.
somebody has kids and wants to,
No, I mean, that would be cool to save.
there you go.
I'm not.
Well, they got cut by a human.
Oh, this kid.
Well, why is that so smooth? I mean, that's a smooth cut. Or how did that happen?
Unless it's when they're culling that occurred. One of the things they did is once the white buffalo shot or bolted one of the deer, they cut up the meat and used it in Trenton to the homeless shelter. So maybe that's one of the big joints, I guess, maybe for a deer, and maybe a big socket. And so that's an interesting observation, yeah, with the cut.
Horse would be a good guess. I'll take it if nobody wants it.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, somebody take it. It's
So I just
cool.
spotted it on the ground right
It's
there.
probably not edible, you know.
Good source
It's really
of calcium.
beautiful, though.
Oh.
Pattern on the inside.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought that was amazing as I was just strolling over there.
it's incredible.
This is mountain mint. It's a native wildflower. If you take some of
There's
the
a lot of that here. In
But
this
yeah,
field. In this
yeah.
field. This field will get,
if you want a nice smell, you can.
this field will get your waist high. This whole field, until as far as you could see, will get as high as your waist.
Yeah, it's got a white flower in the summers. Very pretty. If you want to crush some and get a smell, it looks like this.
Yeah.
When you're getting to know plants, you can get to know them one time of the year, and then you have to get to know them how they look in another part of the year. So it's kind of an ongoing process of getting to know a plant in all its guises.
Deer don't like not.
Apparently not.
Yeah. How you doing? Fine, thanks, Steve. Oh, sorry. It's a mint, but the deer don't like it. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it is a mint technically. Oh, yeah, sorry. It's not. I guess the deer don't like
You were
it.
saying something
Well, a lot
not.
of the deer have coffee breath, and so they have a mint.
They want to retain that.
It's a great, I mean, it's a really potent scent. It's great.
Here's wineberry. This is what you may be thinking is raspberry sometimes. This is wineberry. You see the very fuzzy purple? It's very tasty. It's an exotic, and we control it by eating the berries. That's how it's not very invasive, so
We're contributing.
yes, we do our best by eating as much of it as we can. Here's another plant of the meadow. This is called Indian hemp. It's in the milkweed family, so if you took a leaf off in the summer, you'd see milky sap. I don't think the monarchs eat this. They go for the straight milkweeds, but this is related to milkweed. And it's a common native plant, and you see it's taking advantage of the wind to spread itself around. So that was here. It's all this little stuff here. I'll just stick it back on there. Whatever. You may have it growing on a hedge near you. You can see it's fairly evergreen. It still has its leaves. Sometimes it completely takes over a shrub, and you think you still have a shrub hedge, but really you just have Japanese honeysuckle that's growing on what used to be on the structure that used to be the hedge.
Obviously not native.
Right. And then eventually the whole thing collapses and you have a shrinking hedge.
Does it flower like honeysuckle we know?
Yeah, that's the one that the kids like to.
Oh, so the one that is so common is Japanese, is actually Japanese.
Right.
Okay.
And if it has a red tubular flower, it's the native coral honeysuckle. How are we doing?
I was just mentioning some people. This was often used as well as the pond area for baiting by hunters originally and white buffalo later on. They'd throw corn feed, stacks rows of corn feed, and week after week, so that the deer would keep coming back to the spot, knowing, oh great, it's food there, and nice and safe. And then they would
oh, okay,
set up a blind and not so safe.
Well, I can't speak to the techniques, but you know, the value of having a reduced number of deer is huge for native plants because they've wiped out all the spring ephemerals, all the trilliums, and you know, bluebells. All that stuff is gone now. Because of this huge.
Yeah, there's definitely an accidents. We all I'm sure have hit our brakes once or twice as we're on bicycles. But there's a balance, and that's some of us believe there's the balance has sort of been. It's been tipped.
It's interesting to see the. I mean, when land managers get together to talk about, people who are managing all these nature preserves around New Jersey, there's a round table where we get together, and deer is the #1 issue in terms of just habitat quality, because they've transformed things so much, and you can see it. They started in 2000, the deer control here, and I moved here in 2003, and at that time there's a spice bush, which is a native tree, which deer really don't much like because it has a strong flavor, but they were eating that down, and you'd see these spice bush that had been around for maybe 50 years, and they had one big stem that was too high for the deer to get to, and then they'd be trying to send up new stalks because they should have multi-stems, these spice bush. But all those would be nibbled to the ground. So you'd have this big one that was getting older and older and older and just hanging on. That was a lifeline for this shrub. And the deer were frustrating any kind of growth, beyond that. And then as the deer numbers started to fall, you'd see some of those new shoots making it high enough to, get beyond the deer browse. And as soon as that happened, as soon as the bush had these other stems, it would ditch the original, the lifeline that it had, and so you'd have a healthy spice bush, and then the spice bush makes these berries that are really rich in lipids, in fats, which is really important for birds because fat is a very efficient, very concentrated kind of energy. So the birds, it's really good food for the birds, and so. Now the birds can have all those berries because the deer have no longer been eating the shrubs, and also a lot of birds prefer to nest in a spice bush. So it's really, the ecology starts to come back. It starts to heal, and it's because things were out of balance. Too many deer. There wasn't any predator. We'd already wiped out all the predators that used to limit their population. So I think it's really important that we take responsibility once we've thrown the balance off. It's then up to us to try to bring back the balance and so that you can have this biodiversity.
Do you discuss the geese too?
Yeah, the geese. I don't know what to do about the geese. I thought they were good to eat, but somebody told me they aren't good to eat, so I don't. Do you have?
No, I just didn't know if that was on your agenda, in terms of environmental impact.
Yeah, they're a problem. Water pollution, and they mobilize a lot of nitrogen, and it's not good. And overpopulation, clearly. That hasn't come up in terms of they aren't devastating the woodlands in terms of eating, but they certainly are a blight around. So what we try to do is grow a lot of shrubs and thick vegetation around the lakes, so it's not so inviting. They don't like to go through places where they can't see very well. So that limits a bit, but if you have any ideas.
I always thought about a nice little gosling for dinner, but...
Yeah. what they
I
do.
think it's illegal, isn't it?
Yeah, I know they're protected, but they aren't really natural in that they aren't really migrating anymore. So.
Well, part of the deal with the natives versus the invasives is, you know, the deer don't eat the invasives, right? And so that's why they grow, and they eat all the natives, and so the native, there's so many deer, the natives just get wiped out, and all you have is the invasives.
It's amazing how conservative wildlife's food preferences are. They don't, you know, you have multiflora rows all over the place, but the deer won't eat it, except if it's very young and tender, then they eat it. But you'd think all the, you know, they go for the most abundant thing, but that they maintain the same, you know, taste for the native, and so they just really wipe out the native, and that gives these exotics a competitive advantage because they aren't getting eaten, so they can really take over. So the deer throw things out of balance that way too, is because they're selectively eating the native plants.
And as you noted, because there's less natives, then there's less, you know, goodies for the birds and other wildlife to eat, so you get less of them. It's
right,
cascading.
and the birds are really dependent on insects early in the spring. If they're raising young, they really need a high protein diet to pass on to the young. And the insects are very conservative about what they eat. They may eat only like 3 kinds of plants and you know, different species of insects. So if those plants have been eaten to the ground by the deer, then there isn't anything for that insect, so that falls out of the ecosystem, and you know, there's fewer insects for the birds to eat, and so there's this real domino effect that you see. If something's out of balance, then it sends ripples through the whole ecosystem.